Welcome everyone, my name is Aleman Reyes. I'm the host for the Wildcat Show, and today for the 11th interview, we have someone who is one of the most influential when it comes to the Board of Education's financial decisions. We're talking about the superintendent himself, Dr. Thomas Taylor.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
For sure. I mean, it has been so long just to get up to here, and I have to say that I'm pretty much impressed with what you've been doing as of lately. You've been very charismatic, and not only that, when I came to the Loyola ceremony, I was actually I got to meet you for a while. I even got to say hi, and it's honestly a big honor just to have you in. So.
Well, thanks for following up, and I'm glad we could have this conversation.
Yeah, for sure. So let's just start off with what happened as of recently, because I think that the steps leading to what happened in regards to the budget is just as important as the numbers. So let's go back to when you guys actually, the district requested for the county council versus what they approved. And so when we saw that there was a $36 million budget deficit, it must have been heartbreaking.
Terrible.
But just besides that, did you know that it was going to be of this size? And if so, what were some of the first things you were willing to put up on the line in order to mitigate or decrease this gap?
Well, first, let me just say how excited I am that you're interested in the budget.
Yeah.
Because that's typically not something that a lot of people are super interested in unless there's a shortfall like there is right now.
Yeah.
MCPS is huge. We have 211 schools and we serve 150,000 students. And we have almost 30,000 employees. That's a lot of people.
Right.
And it's very expensive to run a school system that size. We're actually the 15th largest school system in America. Mm-hmm. And so when people see big numbers like $3.6 billion in your budget, they're like, oh my gosh, you can afford anything. And the reality is it goes really quick when you divide it by all of those different factors. Mm. We did not know how much we were going to be funded until really the very last minute because it kept changing. Our county council has a lot of priorities, and the school system is just one of those priorities. Granted, we think that it should be the top priority. We think that we deserve full funding based on our request. We don't think that our request was crazy. As a matter of fact, we feel like there were a lot of essentials in our budget that really did need to be fully funded. But when it comes down to it, our budget is really 90% people.
Yeah.
And when your budget is 90% people, that 10% that's not people are things that you really can't live without, like the electric bill, gas for buses, food in the cafeterias, stuff like that are really very essential. And not to say that the people aren't less essential, they absolutely are, but it is the area that we can trim. And so when we look at our budget and we're a school system that is declining in enrollment, we really have two choices: the number of people that we employ or how much we pay them.
Okay.
And the tricky part with deciding on adjusting how much we pay them or doing a salary reduction is that we've actually signed contracts with our employees and said, look, this is what we're committing to pay you. So making any kind of reduction there, that really wasn't even an option.
Okay.
And that left us not a whole lot of room for where we would make other reductions. And what that meant for us was we had to choose the number of people that were on our payroll. And so we did make some pretty critical decisions early on. Granted, we didn't have a whole lot of time. We had like 2 weeks to figure all this out. We decided to make sure that we were not reducing classroom teaching positions.
Okay.
That was our one thing that we were not going to reduce, was the number of classroom teaching positions that we had in the district. We wanted to make sure we stuck with the staffing ratios that we have right now, because in the past, they have made those reductions. And we felt like class size was already getting too big. And if anything, we want to see class size shrink, not grow. So we made some tough choices.
So you mentioned how you didn't want to reduce those people, as well as, like, my question to you, just to follow up on that, what were some of the first things you were willing to just rule out completely? Like, why were some of those things?
It's a good question. The first thing that we were willing to rule out was classroom teachers. We weren't going to touch them. The second thing that we were going to do was we were trying to make any kind of reductions as far away from the classroom as possible. So positions that support the classrooms, like paraprofessionals.
Yeah.
Those things are absolutely essential and oftentimes get overlooked. Where that left us is we made some pretty significant reductions in our central office, which does hurt our school system in a lot of unseen ways. We have a lot of employees. They do expect paychecks on time. They do expect support when they need it. And this is the mechanism that provides that support, but we made some reductions, some hard cuts here. We also made some cuts to our support services, which I'm going to tell you right now, this is a terrible time to cut support systems. A lot of our students and families rely on our support systems. Right. We see them as essential, but for us, it was a choice between support positions or the classroom, and we chose support positions.
Okay. So just to kind of piggyback off of that, you mentioned how those 2 weeks happened. So on May 21st, you talked about how it was going to be 430 positions.
Yes.
And then 2 weeks after, on June 4th, you talked about decreasing it down to 415.
Yes.
My question to you then would be, what happened between those 2 weeks that made it or influenced that decision?
Yeah, we were able to find a few contracts that we were able to reduce and a few things that we could move from 1 year to another year,
right?
To not have to fund it, to save almost 20 positions. That was a huge win for us. Granted, saving 20 positions when you're still looking at reducing over 400 positions doesn't feel like a huge win, but that's 20 people that we were able to save their jobs and their careers.
So would you say perhaps new information was involved or new revenue was involved, or was it something like even just the public and their opinions that might have also come into play?
Yeah, unfortunately, it was way more mathematical than that.
Okay.
We did not have new revenue. We were stuck with the number that we were stuck with, and it really was doing our very best to try to get our list down as narrow as we possibly could and ask the hard questions. What can we really just live without from 1 year to the next? The hard reality is I want all those positions back.
Right.
Those folks are absolutely essential to us. Those will be a part of future budget requests because I see them as essential.
Yeah.
And it just was painful that we had to part ways with a group of really dedicated team members, albeit even if it's just in the short term.
Yeah, and I think when I was looking at the numbers again, we actually increased them budget by $140 million.
Yes.
If I'm correct, right?
Yeah.
And so when people see that and they're like, okay, something bad happened, they mostly focus on the bad stuff. They focus, okay, we lost 420 people, but we actually are still growing. What do you think might have influenced that growth in the budget?
So sort of. We are absolutely, the cost of doing business goes up every year.
Yeah.
So there's inflation. And one of the ways that we offset inflation is we give a salary increase to our employees. So the cost of our salary increase was about $190 million. And that's what it cost to give our salary increase to offset inflation and some of the other costs that they're dealing with. But we only got $140 million.
Yeah.
So you see there's like a gap.
Yeah.
And that was the gap that we were trying to resolve. Mm-hmm. So fortunately for us, Montgomery County is healthy enough that there's going to be some revenue growth every year. The real problem is it's just not enough to cover the cost and the expenses to keep us going at the size that we are without making other changes in county government. And don't get me wrong, I got a huge axe to grind with how we prioritize things, because MCPS used to be more than half of the county's budget. Mm-hmm. Today we're less than half of the county's budget. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't have a budget crisis if we were more than half of the county's budget. Mm-hmm. And here we are. It's how does Montgomery County want to prioritize the school system is really the big question that needs to be answered.
Okay. So I just want to really go over the trade-offs, and we're going to get really into the specifics.
So, I can't wait.
Yeah. So the board's own final adopted staffing table would show how social workers actually were cut from 81 to 38. And now I'm not the best at math, but that's an almost 50% cut.
Huge.
Right. And then again, a loss of 43. And pupil personnel workers were cut from 54 to 26. Again, an almost loss of 28. Now, we could go on and on about the different people that were cut out. And the span of numbers went up to like $9.6 million for some workers, while some were $2.5 million. Now, when thinking about these numbers and you're going through the amount of positions that we're putting out, this group specifically was cut out. But when going over the numbers, were there other positions that you were looking to consider that you thought, hey, maybe that would actually, mitigate or help out?
Absolutely. We gave the board a long list of potentials, and some of them included classroom teachers as a potential. One of the things that we're looking at is the potential for a middle school schedule change, and there was an option that would have totally transformed middle school, not in a positive way, by the way, and would have had some reductions there. That would have been an option. How we landed, where we landed with those two positions in particular, and again, I wish I could have them all back in a heartbeat, is we had to ask ourselves the question, what do we absolutely essentially need to survive this next year, and what are the critical things that we must perform where we need specific personnel to do those things? Social workers in particular. We must legally, we are required to have social workers in the school system to perform social histories for students with disabilities when we're going through the IEP process. Students with disabilities require an individualized education plan. Somebody has to write that individualized education plan. Part of the team that does that, a social worker is on that team. So we needed to make sure that we had enough of our social worker team to stay intact to perform that function.
Okay. So
absolutely critical. PPWs, really quick.
Go ahead.
Same thing. We have wide sweeping attendance and support needs across the county. We have 26 high school clusters that we support in the county. And so reducing from 50 some odd positions to 26, we wanted to make sure that we had at least one PPW per high school cluster to support that whole cluster. Now, that's a really significant workload for those people. But it was, what can we do to get from point A to point B? And that's why we kept that many and not just completely eliminated the group altogether.
Right. So do you feel that some of these services could actually be replicated?
That's a good question. I do. Fortunately for us, Montgomery County does have a rich network of nonprofits and also a health and human services department. As a matter of fact, we are the only county in Maryland that has its own standalone full service health and human services department. That makes us unique. That's also something that we can leverage that maybe we haven't leveraged as well as we would like to have done in the past. Unfortunately, this crisis presents an opportunity where we're going to have to go to those partners and work out arrangements to make sure that folks get the services that they need. Yeah,
so using that flexibility for once when it's actually a need. So just to really go about that, I was actually able to talk to a former MCPS social worker. And from what they were at least able to tell me is the fact that they were actually looking to bill for Medicaid services. Was that something that was looked over?
Yeah, and we will continue to pursue that as an option. I've done that in a number of school districts in the past. We previously didn't bill for Medicaid, so getting that up and running and getting that starting, it's usually not a revenue generator for school systems right out of the gate in year one. We're still going to continue to pursue that as an option because that is a great strategy. And again, I would have loved to have kept our social worker team intact because I think that could have been something that we really could have leveraged in the future. It's a great idea and one that we're pursuing still today.
Yeah. So they mentioned how that actually would have helped with the salaries. How important would you say that salaries are when considering how you're managing the funding of the operating budget?
It is 90% of our operating budget.
Right.
So, or 89.8 or something like that. Yeah. It's a huge percentage. So the choices that we have really in our budget is, how much do we want to change the salary up or down for our employees? If we move it down, we have a savings.
Yeah.
If we move it up, we have less money to work with.
Right.
And how many people do we employ and what are their jobs? that those really are the levers that we pull in the budgeting process, because we have a ton of great needs. We have a ton of opportunities that we'd love to explore. Unfortunately, we just don't have the financial resources that we once did proportionally. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a great argument that as a community we could make to county council to say, look, MCPS, we're a school system that's worth investing in. Yeah. And, these folks were providing these great services for us. And, there's a hole in our heart that's missing that isn't filled because we're not providing these services, and we'd love to bring those back.
Right. And so just to move, we're talking a lot about the things that happen now. I want to move into how that is going to affect how that might actually look once we start the school year.
Right.
I have been part of Walter John's for the past 3 years, and I personally have built a very big connection with my counselor. So now,
that's great.
Knowing that at least my one and only social worker is gone, now with the caseload of students that a counselor now has to do, because counselors, in my opinion, are seen as some of the people that are willing to help and step up in conversations. Mm-hmm. Obviously now without the social workers now, who actually, I think the biggest misconception that people have is that besides just crisis management and risk assessment, they also not only help students, but they also help administration. Mm-hmm. It helps teachers, it helps faculty, etc. And that all is super important. But now that they're gone, who are students going to look for is more than likely going to be the counselors. And with their mm-hmm. caseload already being 500 to 1, or maybe even less than that, because my counselor literally told me that's a 250 plus ratio, mm-hmm. how is the job of the social worker going to be transitioned into a faculty member or anyone who's going to step into that role in the case that there are schools that aren't well funded or don't have the right support for mental health?
Well, this is a great opportunity for me to correct some misconceptions. Yeah. Your counselor told you exactly the correct information, which is that the ratio of counselors to students is 250 to 1.
Yeah.
What she probably didn't tell you is that that's one of the best counselor to student ratios in the country.
Okay.
Now, that is the target, and that is exactly what we should be aiming at, is to have a student to counselor ratio. It doesn't mean they're not busy. They're very busy, and they work very hard, but that is an optimal counselor to student ratio, and that should be what we're aiming at. Now, I will say that our elementary student to counselor ratio in some cases is like 600 or 700 to 1, and we have a lot of work to do to make sure that students at the elementary level have a little bit better access to a counselor than at the high school or even at the middle school level. That being said, there's some things that we're just not going to be able to do. Mm-hmm. And then there's other things that we have to be very smart about how we connect students in crisis to resources. Your counselor should be a great first line connection for you. And my best advice to any student is, if you go to school and you don't have an adult that you're comfortable or that you're connected with, that's a problem. And that's as much of a problem for you as it is for us. We want to make sure that you have at least one trusted adult in the school. And for so many people, that trusted adult is a counselor, and that's a great person to make as your trusted adult. Mm. But if you don't, we need to find and make sure that you have access to a trusted adult. A critical function that counselors need to perform and other school staff need to perform is to make sure that you have access to a complete portfolio of mental health services.
Yeah.
Guess what? You already do. I just don't think we do a very good job of advertising it.
Why is that?
Because we just haven't. And honestly, we haven't done a great job of making sure that you know all of the resources that you actually have access to and have had access to for a really long time. So one of the changes that I think you'll see this upcoming year is a lot more publicity around how to get help and where to go for help of some of those community resources that may not necessarily be right in front of your face or right available in the building or down the hall, but that you can access easier than I think a lot of people think that you can.
Right.
So I think that we're going to be able to close the gap on some really critical issues. We do have staff in every building that is trained in mental health first aid for students who are in crisis. But a lot of this is triaging or channeling students to the resources that can help them best long term.
Okay, so that's already something that's been planned out and is
Absolutely.
looking to be implemented
Yeah.
this coming school
That's
year
right.
and for the next.
Yeah, so you'll hear and see an awful lot about that this August and into the fall.
So now I really want to go over the performance. I understand, right, that we cut away the assisting positions for I believe English teachers,
Yep.
right? So I want to go over the Maryland State report card, right? Because that helps a lot. And when schools, we're actually one of the above state average.
We are
in terms of literacy.
still not great. A lot of
Yeah.
room for improvement.
Right.
Yeah.
In terms of how, in comparison to counties like Howard County, which is
Mm-hmm.
like 65%, and we're 57 something percent.
We went up a little bit higher. We're almost at 60%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, do you believe now, with those important positions gone, that we might see a decrease in performance?
I don't think we're going to see a decrease in performance, but I can tell you it didn't help. And let me tell you where I'm most concerned, because I think our composition assistants did a great job. I really do. And one of the areas that I think that they were rightfully appreciated for a lot of help is in helping students write college essays.
Okay.
And even though that's not measured on some like performance test or something like that, that is a really critical role that those people performed in a lot of our schools, and they did a great job doing it. And so I feel like we are going to miss a little something there. And I think that adds to the burden of our English teachers. It is an extra burden and a little bit more on the grading when English teachers have extra essays that they have to review. It takes a long time. That's probably why you don't get work back as quickly as you want to, or feedback as quickly as you want to from some English teachers, because they want to do a good job and make sure they give you critical feedback. And I think we're going to lose something there, and it's a huge loss for the school system because that was something that helped make us unique.
Mm-hmm. So in the case of that, I want to talk about how this cut might contribute, if in the case that we might see a decrease in performance, or we might even just stabilize it.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the AIB?
Yes, very.
Okay, so there's like, in the case that the people don't know, if performance actually decreases, they actually have to maybe not cut funding, but maybe hold it for...
No, they might cut funding.
They cut funding, right?
Yeah,
And
they absolutely could cut funding.
In the possibility that is there a performance threshold that makes it so that in the case that it decreases or something is going on, is there a way for that to be warned, so that you guys are able to pivot and able to work around that?
That's a great question, and yes. And we think that that's definitely the case. Now, the advantage in terms of performance, and why I don't think it's really going to impact performance per se, or at least not on our state assessment performance, is because these were high school positions, and a lot of that activity was happening after that requirement was satisfied. So a lot of the focus from the AIB is focused on grades that are younger than what the English composition assistants were serving.
Okay.
That being said, doesn't make them any less valuable. They were critically important teammates. Wish we had them back. Wish we could have afforded that, because I do think that they help our school community substantially.
All right. So just to go away from just the personnel to pivot.
Sure.
Let's go over the verified spending that's been going on. So I want to talk about the warehouse lease that has recently happened. So I'm just going to read this. So
Shoot.
MCPS did sign a 10-year warehouse lease.
Yes.
And so it was approved by the board on October 30th, 2025, and it was effective on November 1st, right?
Yes.
And so it was roughly $3 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so the building needed about $13 million.
Yes.
Right. And so you guys were again asked for funding, right, for capital, or you asked for a capital budget request, but then upon it was actually rejected. And now you guys are having to use this. You guys can't even use the warehouse for the next, for say 4 to 5 years, knowing that it's gonna hold up a lot because it was approved during the time in which we had the deficit, right? Am I somewhere around that? So
close. And again, this is a great thing that I'm so excited I get to clear up a misconception. We actually are going to be using that warehouse.
Okay.
And we're not going to be able to use it the way we wanted to use it. In the short term, that's really annoying. We're still going to get a lot of value out of that space. We desperately need it. I'm going to invite you and anyone who else that from the communications club or that you want to bring with you to a special budget presentation this fall where we're going to have it at our existing warehouse.
Okay.
So that you can see the conditions of our existing warehouse.
Okay.
I'm going to cut to the chase.
Uh-huh.
You're going to be shocked at how bad it is.
Uh-huh.
And you're going to say, oh my gosh, Dr. Taylor, we desperately need a warehouse.
Right.
I promise you.
So that's something that, in my opinion, how is that approved? I think I might be regurgitating, but how was that approved during the $36 million budget deficit?
So they are two different pots of money.
Okay.
We have an operating budget and we have a capital budget. The capital budget is largely like construction
Right.
and maintenance, things like HVAC. And I got to tell you, that's
$20
just
million.
as bad.
Yeah, that is
Just as bad
yeah.
as our operating budget situation, because there's a lot of schools that don't have a properly functioning HVAC system. They have roofs that are leaking. Mold. Oh, where do I start with mold? Mold for days.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw this on the news or not, but like there's a big pipe that burst at Quince Orchard last year, and it was like flooding in the hallways. It was crazy. Our facilities need to be taken better care of, and so that's that budget over here. Our operating budget is a little bit separate from that. This is like our day-to-day activities, and that $36 million gap that we had to close was separate from our capital budget where we're doing construction projects and things of that nature. Now, I have a frustrating point with this, and in a perfect world, I'd love to see both of these fully funded. Neither of them were fully funded.
Right, because now, if I'm correct, elementary schools were actually pushed back with projects.
You got it.
Yeah.
So we ended up losing several projects that really are long overdue in our capital improvement plan. And in addition to a $36 million gap, we're like hundreds of millions of dollars short in our capital improvement budget. So even though this one doesn't get as much play in the media because it's not directly tied to, job loss and people and whatnot, this one actually was way more significant of a hit and has way longer term impact than our operating budget that we're kind of talking about right now.
Which one would you say you're trying to mitigate and prioritize as much as possible? I understand that the balance can be quite tricky to at least figure out, but which one are you looking to get over with? That's
a great question, because I think one of them is really like a long-term project and the other one is like survival from day to day. Our operating budget is absolutely essential for us to keep the lights on and for us to continue to provide instruction. The question that we keep running into is, well, how can you do that if the learning environment is so poor? Mm-hmm. And so I got to tell you, I really struggle to make sure that I'm trying to balance both. Mm-hmm. And that I have an eye on both what's happening on the day-to-day front as well as like what are our long-term plans. And the reality is that even if we put things on the path to correcting our facilities, you and any younger siblings you have in the school system will be long gone before we have fully corrected all of those issues. And I will be long retired by the time they get fixed, because it took us about 20 years to kind of get in the hole that we're in right now. And unfortunately, it's going to take 20 years for us to get out of it.
Right. It's going to be a
So
long
you will
time.
be an old man by the time we've solved that problem.
Right.
And that's even the fastest way we could possibly do it.
Okay. So
you're gonna be superintendent after me and fix that, right?
Probably, hopefully. Who
That's
knows?
what I'm talking about.
So, what was I going to say?
You restarted?
Okay.
Good.
Okay. So, I'm going to go over something that isn't wanting to go after your character.
Fine.
After all, I love the conversation that we're having. You're a great man. I don't ever judge anyone. So let's go over, in March 2026, the Board of Education approved a procurement contract with a vendor called Fort Imprint for $375,000.
Okay.
And so it officially described as covering classroom awards, trophies, and recognition products distributed across MCPS schools.
Okay.
And so that came on top of roughly $378,000 already spent on the same vendor over the 2 previous fiscal years. I'm laying this next to like the budget timeline specifically because that approval came about 7 weeks before your own email to the county council warning about the potential cuts, and about 10 weeks before the board's final vote to eliminate the 450 positions.
Sure.
My question to you is, how do you square approving for the discretionary spending with the financial picture you were describing to the council nearly at the same time?
So we still have to run the school system. And I know that sounds like a lot of money, but when you divide it amongst 211 schools and a district this size, you're talking a little over $1,000 per school site. That's actually not a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And so if anything, that number should be much, much higher. Okay. Not that low. Okay. The fact that we're only spending that on recognitions, and you should be disappointed that we're spending that little on recognitions, not the other way around. Okay. Looking at it as one number for an entire district for one item, it looks big, but relative to the size of the district, it really isn't. Okay. And we still have to keep the district running with some basic necessities. Mm-hmm. And think about it from your perspective as a student. If you were to go through your entire high school career and no one was recognized for anything, whether it was a teacher who did a good job or whether it was a student who won a state championship or something along those lines, and we just never celebrated anything like that, what kind of experience would that be?
It would be a good one.
It'd be a pretty terrible experience.
Yeah.
And so if anything, I see that as an area where we really probably need to do a little bit better job of recognizing. And so one of the ways that I look at how we spend money is in what's the return on investment. Okay. So for a little bit more than $1,000 per school site, what's the return on that investment? Can we see a sizable impact to keep morale up a little bit, even though times are tough? Okay. Maybe yes, maybe no. And so we try to weigh that the best we can against how we might spend on something different. And so we've worked very hard, I think, to try to find things that teachers have told us it's not really that effective. Don't spend any more money on this. We don't really find value in this. Or parents have said, this online program really isn't meeting our needs. Or students have even said, I log into this isn't as great as it once was. Maybe you should do this instead. It informs the decision making that we make.
Okay. So
we also spend a ton on cookies. Oh, okay. In the cafeteria.
All right.
Yeah, that was something that the previous student member of the board was very, very concerned about, was our $50,000 cookie expenditure one year. Sounds like a lot. But again, 180 school days, 211 school sites, goes pretty quick.
Okay. Now, before I get into other questions that might be a little bit more emotional, I just want to ask, so again, there's just this other piece that, again, is not trying to go after you whatsoever.
It's fine.
So it's about understanding the sequence of decisions. On June 25 of 2026, about 3 weeks after the board voted to cut 450 positions, the board unanimously voted for the approval of a 6.23% raise increase for MCPS chiefs, deputy chiefs, and associate superintendents, and the senior administrator whose salaries fall because they fall outside the union contracts. I understand that you're trying to work around so many past decisions from previous superintendents or leaders that have had to work around, and you're either having to move them away, cut them completely, or go with what you believe is better, what you and other people believe is best. So how is that decision approved, not only unanimously, but so quickly right after the cuts?
Well, it was in line with the union contracts, because that was the same percentage that the union contracts were. Okay. But because they were not part of a union contract, they have to be done separately as a separate vote. The past practice in MCPS is that everybody receives something that's on par with in this case, because they are school administrators. If they're not in the union, they receive a salary adjustment that's equal to that of what was in the principals union or the administrators union. And so that's exactly what that was. Mm-hmm. So, some of this is fair is fair. If one group of employees is receiving a raise, then another group of employees should receive a commensurate raise along with that. And that's what they got. Not more, not less.
Okay. So who would you say was in the process of approving it?
Well, ultimately, the Board of Education approves it.
Okay.
But the recommendation that I made was based on what the past practice has been, which is to be fair to everyone.
Okay. So let's just circle back to when you were pretty little. You actually were part of the MCPS system.
I grew up in MCPS.
Yeah,
Very proud of that.
It's a full circle back moment, and you're part of it now as a superintendent, and you're actually delegating across a system that largely by a lot of students is seen like a bureaucracy. And so my question to you...
I see it that way too sometimes.
Yeah. In comparison to now and back then, what do you think has changed, whether for the better or for the worse for MCPS?
Gosh, that is such a great question. Well, I think it's way more complex today.
Okay.
It is so much harder to be a student today than it was 20 or 30 years ago. It really was. A lot easier back then. Didn't have social media, didn't have just the influence of media in general. It was a lot less politically divisive. I mean, the issues were just totally different issues. Now, there were a lot of things that were not great too.
Yeah.
You can't look at it through rose-colored glasses and say, "Oh my gosh, this was amazing." It wasn't. Racism was still a significant issue 30 or 40 years ago. We were 40 years ago just coming out of a really significant enrollment dip, kind of like the enrollment dip that we're experiencing right now. So history's repeating itself a little bit there. But it was also a time where there were higher expectations across the board that were adhered to with a little bit more fidelity than today. To be completely candid with you, I think that we've gotten soft in a few areas, and we probably need to step up. And I think that's a little bit on all of us, myself included, where we need to have better systems of accountability to own the things that are not going well and work together to try to solve those problems. I think we were a little bit better at solving problems a generation ago. I think that there's a compelling case that could have been made that in 2009, 2010, that MCPS was not only the best school system in Maryland, but one of the best, if not the best school system in America. And we're not that today.
Why is that?
I think that we've kind of lost our focus. And I think that this is an opportunity for us to put our focus back on our core mission of teaching and learning and trying to provide a safe, welcoming, and really prosperous environment for you to be prepared for what comes next in life. And, I think every single person in MCPS, you have incredibly hardworking teachers and staff members who are there to support you. You've got great parents. You've got great peers. Everybody wants us to be successful, but it is going to require us to have a little bit more elbow grease and a little bit more collaboration than what we maybe have done in the last few years.
I like that you mentioned accountability, because accountability can only be enforced through transparency.
Yes.
I think that the system that we have today is pretty good, but in how the system is perhaps perceived, or how it's perhaps even just seen when it's actually visible, whether physically or not, matters so much. Because then if people don't see it, they don't believe it. When I talked to the new 49th student member of the board, Little DeWitt, he told me that he was going to visit as many schools as possible and look at the infrastructure and see it in order to believe it. And I believe in that
it's rough.
too. And so my question to you would then be, do you think that having more direct, at least relationship with the schools around your area, or even just the schools just across the MCPS county as a whole, do you think that would help make better and more like representative decisions across MCPS as a whole?
Well, I try to spend as much time as possible out in schools and as little time as possible in central office. I think if there's a criticism of me and my time at central office is that I try not to spend time here. I try to spend time in schools for just that reason. I will offer this one thing in terms of transparency. You have a very well-researched set of questions, and I applaud you for that. But the reason that you're able to find that information is because it's available. And the reason it's available is because we want it to be transparent, our good stuff and our bad stuff. And it's okay to have bad stuff if we own it. And if we own it, we can make improvements. It's when we try to hide from it, or when we try to dodge it, or when we fail to acknowledge it, that's when things totally become a mess.
How's that happened before?
Well, yeah, I think so. I think MCPS developed a kind of a bad rap a few years ago of not putting a lot of things out there, and that there were some issues with disclosing information. I'm thrilled that you have been able to find this information that's readily available, and everything should be just a web search away, and you should be able to access this stuff, and you should be able to ask these tough questions.
Right.
But I hope you found that I'm not afraid to answer them.
Right.
And the good, the bad, they all have context. They all have an answer. And I just really appreciate you taking the time to ask them.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people, it's easy to carry like hard feelings without knowing the context behind them. And thank you for asking those tough questions.
Yeah. And just to move around that, and just like, I really like how direct you are because of the questions that I have, and that anyone else, 100%, the public, that they want to at least ask you so much. How would you make 160,000, well, 156, what was it? Well,
it's like about 150,000.
156,000 and
it's going
49,
down, unfortunately.
156,000 and 49 students feel like they're actually being represented by the system.
You know, the MCPS does some things really well in that space.
Yeah.
And then in other areas, not so great. The fact that we have the most powerful student member of the board in the entire state of Maryland, I think goes a long way. The student member of the board in Montgomery County Public Schools is imbued with certain voting rights that other SMOBs don't have.
Okay.
So it's not as influential in other areas of the state as it is right here in MCPS. Your SMOB does have a full voice, a full vote on the issues of the day. Votes on the budget, absolutely critical, and that is one really important avenue. I think that that the part that we don't do so well in is leveraging some of our existing structures to then take ideas and turn them into tangible actions. For example, we have a really elaborate student government system with MCR, which is the Montgomery County Regional Student Government System. But turning some of those ideas and some of those discussion points into action items, I think is a good next step for us, and a way for great ideas to bubble up and find commonality across schools, because I would almost guarantee that some of the issues that you're experiencing at WJ are shared with your arch nemesis BCC. And shared with Richard Montgomery, and shared with Churchill, and shared with Blake, and shared with Clarksburg. But making sure that you have a venue to share those ideas beyond social media, and finding great avenues to say, okay, how do we take this idea and turn it into something? We need to do a better job of facilitating that for you.
Yeah. Because I feel like a lot of people might feel restricted to be part of those specific organizations.
That's right.
At least what I'm doing right now, that's a way to do it. But how would you, if you were a student now, what would you at least have done in order to at least influence either someone in the board, or perhaps like just like how I'm giving my perspective right now to?
Well, I will say this: I love getting emails from students.
Right.
I certainly welcome them, and to the extent that I can, I write back. I get a ton of email, but when I can, I certainly do. I know that Board of Education members also love getting emails from students. One of the best things to say is that you are a student in that email. So when you're writing out an email, to a Board of Education member, or to me, or to even one of the senior leaders in MCPS, because you can find them on the website. It's very easy to find out who does what and what they're responsible for, is to say, dear so-and-so, I'm a student at Walter Johnson. I'm really interested in this, and not just bringing a problem to the table, but also a suggested solution. And I gotta stress, the suggested solution is a great way to get some engagement and a response, because you certainly have some preferences on the things that matter to you and what you'd like to see different. Well, be sure that you explain what the alternative could look like from your lens as to how that could be different. And I think you might be pleasantly surprised at some of the reaction.
Just to go into my second to last question,
Sure.
Looking back at the personalized cuts, what was actually accepted and or rejected? Not just mentioned, but like actually modeled out.
Like, what do you mean?
So like when you're thinking about who to cut or like who to look at, I think we're going back to like the first initial questions. What did you think was, okay, this can go, this cannot go? And then what was actually mentioned when you actually got into the meetings, you were like, okay, we're going to have to do this. But then when actually being put in place outside of just like in closed doors, what was like, okay, we cannot let that happen?
Yeah, so we actually had those discussions publicly, and I think it's worth people, going and taking a look at those board meetings, because I think that was an important discussion. And where the board landed is that they really did want to preserve what was happening in the classroom and to take any type of reductions and keep them as far away from the direct classroom as possible and as far away from essential functioning. So, for example, we weren't going to cut principals because they're essential to running the school. We weren't going to cut building service managers because they quite literally are essential to running the school. And so we tried to look at it through the lens of, what's this core of essential personnel? And then, and we literally put up a graphic that was like, what's the ring that supports that outside of that? And then what's the ring that's furthest away from that? And looking at our reductions, where can we do things that would cause the least harm, knowing that we'd love to keep everything. We proposed to keep everything. Yeah. Our budget was a proposal to keep everything. And so when we had to make reductions, where were the tough choices going to come from?
All right. So I've been hinting at the fact that I've had a social worker testify at least have her message be translated to you. Would you mind at least hearing what she had to say?
Of course.
In regards to what she believed her work meant to her and how much, at least just leaving now, how much that affected her and or anyone. And so I think it was pretty emotional. So how much does your job mean to you? Like how much is like the relationship that you've built here and the reputation that you have, how much has that impacted you or impacted other students?
This has been, I'm going to get emotional. No, I know. There was no way I wasn't. I obviously can't even think about it. And being able to know that I'm leaving students that have relied on me over the past 3 weeks, just having them reach out to me, having them have these meetings about me not being here and what they're going to do. Like literally I was fired and the morning I received my letter, a girl walks in and says that, crying, saying she wants to kill herself. I have relationships with students and I worry what they're going to do. They don't have trusted adults in the building. They don't have the connections. They don't, I hear a lot of things, what's happening just from all my conversations with kids. I know when bad things are happening, people feel comfortable telling me really scary things just because I have the relationship, because I have the trust, because I care. And, I think that the superintendent doesn't understand that this isn't just, I don't just provide therapy. I'm not an outpatient therapist. It is a different role. It is a crisis management role. I need these students to get out of the bathroom, smoking, vaping, doing things, and into the classrooms. I'm getting them from being stuck in their home, refusing to come to school because of school avoidance and anxiety, and I'm able to help them re-engage into the school environment. That's what social workers do, and it's not just sitting in an office meeting with kid after kid for outpatient therapy. And Department of Health and Human Services can't match that, and they can't do that. And all the principals really know the support and the relationships that we have with the kids and the families, and it's going to be seen. There's no question in my mind that that there is going to be a negative impact next year because we are not in the buildings. He also has used us multiple times this school year when there are shootings, when there are staff arrests for inappropriate things in our school building. Social workers are the ones that are responding and being there and helping process, because we have the clinical expertise and experience, and that's who we are. That's what we're trained to do, and nobody else does. He has relied on us for those services, and now he's not going to have those services. The kids are not going to get the supports after these crises, and even to prevent these crises from happening.
How much does your job?
So, at least having have heard that, what are some of the things you would like to reconsider, or even just say to anyone, any social worker, or anyone that has, lost the opportunity to be part of, this amazing county? What would you say to them?
Well, I would say that I absolutely agree with everything she said, except for one thing, is that we don't understand. I absolutely understand. It's unfortunate. I would have loved to have kept the social workers. They were in my original budget proposal for just that reason. They're absolutely essential. And I do think that we're going to feel the loss. I think that that's going to be very real. I cannot change the amount of dollars that we have.
Yeah.
And so I am stuck with that hard deadline, and we did have to make choices and we did have to prioritize. I wish it was different, but it's not. And so that's just the reality of our situation. And unfortunately, have to make tough choices all the time. And I certainly hope that we're not confronted with more significant tough choices in the future, though, to be completely candid with you, I think we're looking at the next several budget years with a lot of those difficult choices ahead. And I think that this is just the beginning and not the end of those tough choices.
Thank you. So that'll do it for today. Thank you so much, Dr. Thomas Taylor, for even just coming here in this interview.
Absolutely.
I very much hope to work with you in the future. And thank you so much. That'll do it for the 11th episode. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Wildcats.